My roommate tried to literally cook me. From the day we moved in together, my roommate Olivia has looked at me like I'm an annoying mosquito she needs to get rid of. It started with using my bedroom when drunk for personal activities. Then it was forgetting a half-eaten sandwich in my drawer so mold would spread. Just recently, she tampered with the heating settings, so only my shower has no hot water. Everything that gave her just enough plausible deniability when I questioned her. Recently, she invited me to try out the sauna at the gym she worked at after hours. I'd been pretty stressed lately, so I said yes. It was relaxing. I let my mind wander and just enjoyed the heat. But then it came time to get out. I pulled the door handle only for the door to not open. I pulled the handle again, harder this time, but the thick wooden door didn't budge. The digital thermometer on the wall read 112 degrees. Perfect for the 20 minutes I'd planned, but far from perfect when you can't get out. Even worse, the gym was empty, so banging on the door was futile. The only person who knew where I was Olivia. But she had left after letting me into the sauna, saying she had to go meet someone, but I could just push the door shut behind me when I left. I pounded on the small window hoping for a miracle, but the changing room outside was dark and empty. The main lights were off and the only illumination came from the emergency exits down the hall. That's when the heating element clicked on again. I felt the temperature rise, the rocks in the corner glowing red as they pumped more heat into the small wooden box. I tried the handle again, jiggling it, pulling with both hands, but nothing happened. The wood around the handle was starting to feel warm, 120 degrees now, and I was sweating more than normal, my anxiety causing even more overheating. I tried to stay calm, telling myself someone would come, but the gym didn't open until 6 in the morning and it was only 10 at night. Could I survive 8 hours in here? I examined the door more carefully and my stomach dropped. The deadbolt on the inside had somehow been removed. All that was left was screw holes. The mechanism with which doors opened had deliberately been removed. This wasn't an accident. Someone had prepared this sauna to trap whoever came in next. 128 degrees, and I tried to think who would do this. Olivia instantly came to mind, but this seemed too extreme for a way to get rid of a roommate. I used the wooden bucket to bang on the door, but the sound barely carried in the insulated room. The walls were thick cedar designed to keep heat in, and now they were keeping me in too. My phone was in the locker outside, useless. 135 degrees and I was getting dizzy. I sat on the lower bench where it was marginally cooler but still unbearable. My skin felt like it was burning and I poured the last of my water bottle over my head. The heating element should have clicked off by now, but it kept running, the rocks glowing brighter, and I realized someone had tampered with the thermostat too. This thing was going to keep heating until it reached maximum temperature or burned out, and I didn't know which would happen first. 142 degrees and I couldn't think straight anymore. The air burned my lungs when I breathed. I tried kicking the door, but my legs felt weak and the wood was solid, built to last decades. Through the small window, I thought I saw movement, but when I pressed my face to the glass, no one was there. My vision was starting to blur and I knew about heat stroke, how your body stops sweating eventually, how your organs start shutting down one by one. I pressed myself into the corner farthest from the heating element, but there was no escape from the temperature climbing steadily higher. 148 degrees and I could barely stay conscious. I tried to remember if Olivia had seemed strange when she suggested I use the sauna, if she'd watched me go in, or if she'd looked back when she left. I collapsed onto the floor, the wood burning my skin, but I couldn't stand anymore. The thermometer kept climbing. 152, 155. The maximum for this model was 195, and at this rate it would reach that in less than an hour. Through my fading vision, I saw the heating element glowing like coals, and I tried one more time to reach the door, but my arms wouldn't work right. Everything was shutting down. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I thought about how they'd find me in the morning, how Olivia would act shocked and devastated. The last thing I heard was the heating element clicking on again, the temperature still climbing, and somewhere far away, the sound of footsteps in the changing room, either someone here to help or checking to make sure the door was still stuck. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. The footsteps outside jolted me back from the edge and I slapped my palm against the small window with everything left in me. A shadow paused in the dark changing room and I made a sound, something between a croak and a whisper that barely carried through the thick glass. My vision tunneled down to just that shadow, and my hand pressed flat against the window, a last stubborn push to stay alive. The shadow moved closer and a face appeared, eyes going wide when they saw me collapsed there. I tried to mouth the word help, but wasn't sure if any sound came out. Alaya rattled the handle from outside, and I watched through blurred vision as she yanked harder, her face changing from confusion to alarm. She pulled with both hands and the door didn't budge and she pressed close to the glass, saying something I couldn't hear over the blood pounding in my ears. She pulled out her phone and I heard her voice muffled through the door, words like trapped and not breathing right and hurry. She ran toward her cleaning cart and I let my hand slide down the glass, too weak to hold it up anymore. The heat kept pressing in and the thermometer read 158 now and I thought, this is it, she called, but I won't last until they get here. She came back with a crowbar and wedged it into the door frame, putting her full weight on it and leveraging against the jammed mechanism. The wood creaked and she repositioned and tried again, muscles straining under her work shirt. Something gave with a crack and heat blasted out into the cool changing room, and I pitched forward onto the tile floor. The temperature difference hit my body like a shock, and I couldn't stop shaking, my skin going from burning to freezing in seconds. The cool tile felt like ice against my face, and I just lay there gulping air that didn't sear my lungs, my whole body trembling so hard my teeth chattered. Alaya wrapped cold wet towels around my head and neck, talking rapidly into her phone with the dispatcher still on the line. She kept saying my skin was bright red and I was barely responding and please hurry. I heard sirens starting somewhere in the distance and she pressed another cold towel to my forehead, her hands gentle but urgent. The cool water on my scalp felt like both relief and pain, my overheated body trying to process the temperature change and not doing it well. I managed to whisper thank you and she squeezed my shoulder, telling me to stay still and help was almost here. The paramedics rushed in and loaded me onto a stretcher, one of them checking my temperature with an ear thermometer, while the other started an IV line in my arm. I mumbled something about the deadbolt being gone, and one paramedic exchanged a look with her partner, the kind of look that said this wasn't just an accident. They wrapped me in cooling blankets that felt strange against my burning skin, and I drifted as they wheeled me toward the ambulance, the ceiling lights passing overhead in a blur. Someone asked my name and I told them, and someone else asked if I knew what day it was, and I wasn't completely sure. In the ambulance, I faded in and out while they monitored my vitals and adjusted the cooling protocol, talking to each other in calm, professional voices about my temperature and blood pressure and heart rate. Fragments of Olivia's invitation replayed in my head. How casual she sounded when she suggested the sauna. How she mentioned meeting someone and told me to just push the door shut when I left. The pieces started connecting even through my confusion and exhaustion. She knew I'd be alone. She knew the gym was empty. She left, but she knew exactly where I was and that I couldn't get out. The ER admitted me right away, and nurses started aggressive hydration while hooking me up to monitors for my heart and oxygen levels. A doctor came in and explained the risks of heat stroke, using words like kidney failure and brain swelling and heart problems, saying they needed to watch me overnight to make sure my organs were handling the stress. I nodded weakly and let them work, too tired to process the full danger I'd survived. They drew blood and checked my pupils and asked me questions about whether I felt confused or nauseous, and I answered as best I could while machines beeped around me. Around 3 in the morning, a police officer came to take an initial report, and I described the invitation, the jammed door, and the missing deadbolt mechanism. He wrote everything down carefully in a small notebook, asking me to repeat certain details and clarify the timeline. When I mentioned the deadbolt was completely removed with just screw holes left, he underlined something in his notes. He said a detective would follow up in the morning and I needed to rest now. I gave him Alaya's name as the person who found me, and he nodded, saying her 911 call had already documented the scene and they'd secured the sauna as potential evidence. I texted Celestine before dawn, because she was the only person I trusted completely right now. My hands shook typing out that I was in the hospital and not safe going back to the apartment, and her response came back in seconds saying she was coming and asking which hospital. The relief of having someone on my side made me cry for the first time since this happened, tears running down my face while I stared at her messages. She texted that she was getting dressed and would be there in 20 minutes and not to worry about anything else right now. I sent a brief text to Olivia saying I was in the hospital because of the sauna, and her response came back fast, too fast, with shocked emojis and questions about what happened and was I okay. Reading her fake concern made my stomach turn because I knew she was either checking if the trap had worked or building an alibi for when people started asking questions. I didn't respond, and turned my phone face down on the hospital bed, my hands still shaking but now from anger instead of fear. She did this. She planned it. And she was sitting somewhere right now pretending to care while knowing exactly what she'd done. A doctor in blue scrubs came in around 7 that morning with a tablet showing my test results. She pulled up a stool and explained my kidney numbers looked stressed from the heat, but the fluids they'd been pumping in all night were helping everything recover. She asked if I felt confused or dizzy, and I said no, just tired and sore. She gave me a printed sheet with instructions about drinking lots of water, watching for dark urine or decreased bathroom trips, and absolutely no hot showers or exercise for 2 weeks minimum. I needed to follow up with my regular doctor in 3 days to recheck my kidney function and make sure everything was still improving. She signed the discharge paperwork and said a nurse would be in soon to remove my IV and go over the rest of the instructions. I texted Celestine that they were letting me out and she responded immediately saying she was already in the parking lot. The nurse came in 20 minutes later and pulled out the IV line, then went through a checklist about warning signs to watch for like extreme fatigue, confusion, or chest pain. She handed me a folder with all my discharge papers and walked me to the exit where Celestine was waiting by the automatic doors. Celestine hugged me carefully like I might break, and I felt tears starting again. She grabbed my bag and helped me into her car, adjusting the seat so I could lean back. I started crying for real once we were moving and she didn't say anything, just drove and let me get it out. After a few blocks, she reached over and squeezed my hand and said I was staying with her, and we'd figure everything else out later. I nodded and wiped my face with my sleeve. too grateful and exhausted to argue or worry about being a burden. At her apartment, she set me up in her spare room with clean sheets and extra pillows, then brought me water and crackers. I finally looked at my phone and saw 6 texts from Olivia spread across the morning asking if I was okay, what the doctor said, if I needed anything. Every message sounded worried and concerned with little heart emojis, and reading them made my stomach hurt because I could only see the fake concern now. I took screenshots of every single message before I responded, saving them to a folder I labeled evidence. Then I sent back a short message saying I was recovering and staying with a friend for a few days. Her response came back in under a minute with more hearts and saying she was so glad I was okay and to let her know if I needed anything at all. I turned my phone face down and closed my eyes. That afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A calm male voice introduced himself as Detective Raj Swain and said he was following up on the incident at the gym. He asked if I felt up to giving a full statement, and we scheduled it for the next morning at the police station. His voice was professional and steady, and he mentioned he'd already spoken with Aliyah and visited the gym to document the scene. Hearing someone official say they were taking this seriously made me feel less crazy for suspecting Olivia had planned the whole thing. That evening, Celestine drove me to the gym so I could get my stuff from the locker. My hands started shaking when we pulled into the parking lot and got worse as we walked through the front doors. Yellow caution tape was stretched across the sauna door in the back hallway, and I had to stop walking when I saw it. The small window where I'd pressed my palm looked dark and empty, and the memory of that heat and thinking I was going to die hit me so hard I couldn't breathe right. Celestine steadied my arm and asked if I wanted to leave, but I shook my head and kept going to the locker room. Louis Schaffer, the gym manager, was waiting near my locker and started apologizing the second he saw me, saying he couldn't believe this happened in his facility, and he was so sorry. He kept talking about safety protocols and how they were reviewing everything, and he'd already pulled all the keycard access logs from that evening for the police. I thanked him quietly and grabbed my gym bag from the locker, checking to make sure my wallet and keys were still inside. We left quickly, and I didn't look back at the building, and I had no idea if I'd ever be able to work out there again. The next morning, Celestine drove me to the police station, and Detective Swain met us in a small interview room with a recording device on the table. I walked him through everything, starting with the day Olivia and I moved in together, the escalating harassment with my bedroom and the moldy sandwich and the cold shower. Then I described her invitation to try the sauna, how casual she sounded, how she said she had to meet someone, but I could just push the door shut when I left. I explained finding the door jammed and noticing the deadbolt mechanism was completely gone, just screw holes left, and how the temperature kept climbing past when it should have shut off. Detective Swain took notes on a yellow pad and asked specific questions about timing and what Olivia said exactly, and whether I'd documented any of the earlier incidents. I admitted I hadn't because each thing seemed small enough to maybe be an accident, and I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt. He nodded and said that was common in harassment cases, but from now on I should document everything. Aliyah came in about an hour later to give her official statement, and I waited outside while she talked to Detective Swain. When she came out, she gave me a quick hug and said she told him everything about finding the door jammed and how the handle mechanism looked deliberately messed with when she pried it open. She also mentioned the thermostat display was flashing some kind of error code, which seemed important. Her testimony as someone who had no reason to lie or exaggerate carried a lot of weight, and I was grateful she was willing to get involved instead of just walking away. That afternoon, I was lying on Celestine's couch when my phone buzzed with notifications from our apartment building's group chat. Olivia had posted saying there was an equipment problem at the gym where she worked, and her roommate got briefly trapped, but was fine now. Just a scary mechanical issue. Reading her frame it as an accident when I knew she'd planned the whole thing made me so angry I had to put my phone down. Several neighbors responded with concern, asking if I was okay, and I watched her build this whole narrative that erased what she'd actually done. I showed the messages to Celestine and told her I couldn't go back to that apartment while Olivia was still there. She didn't even hesitate before saying I could stay in her spare room as long as I needed. We drove over to the apartment when we knew Olivia would be at work, and I moved fast through the rooms, grabbing clothes and my laptop and anything essential. I wedged a chair under my bedroom door handle just in case she came back early, even though her shift didn't end for 3 more hours. We loaded everything into Celestine's car and left without seeing Olivia, and driving away from that building felt like the first safe breath I'd taken in days. Over the next 2 days, I sit at Celestine's kitchen table with a notebook and write down every incident I can remember. The unauthorized use of my bedroom for personal activities, dates, and times when I found evidence. The moldy sandwich hidden in my drawer, the date I discovered it and photographed the mold spreading across my clothes, the shower temperature sabotage, how only my bathroom had no hot water while hers worked fine. Each thing seemed small enough to ignore at the time, just enough room for her to claim it was an accident if I confronted her. But seeing them all listed with dates and details shows a pattern that's impossible to deny. I go back to the apartment when Olivia is at work and photograph the shower controls still jammed on cold, the mold stains still visible in my drawer even after I cleaned it. The physical evidence makes me feel less crazy, like I'm not making this bigger than it is. I call Ruth, our landlord, and explain the situation, asking about options for breaking the lease or getting Olivia removed. She suggests mediation first, and I have to push back, telling her this isn't a roommate disagreement about dishes or noise. This is a safety issue with an active police investigation. She pauses and says she'll review the police report when it's available and consider my options. Her neutral tone frustrates me because I need her to understand the danger, but I document the call anyway with date and time and what she said. Detective Swain calls the next afternoon saying he's collected my hospital records and the text exchange where Olivia invited me to the sauna. He asks me to forward any other relevant messages, and I send him screenshots of her group chat post about the equipment malfunction and her concerned texts from the hospital. Building this paper trail makes me feel less helpless, even though I know legal processes move slowly. He calls back 2 days later with news about the gym's keycard logs. Olivia accessed the sauna area twice that evening, once when she let me in and again 20 minutes later after she claimed to leave for her meeting. Detective Swain tells me this timing is significant because it suggests she returned to check if the trap was working. The cold calculation of that makes me feel physically sick, knowing she came back to verify I was still trapped while the temperature climbed. But it also validates that I'm not being paranoid or making connections that aren't there. The maintenance records come next, and they're even worse. The sauna deadbolt was removed the day before my visit, logged under a work order for interior hardware inspection. Detective Swain interviews the maintenance worker who says the order came through their system, but seemed strange because nothing was actually wrong with that lock. The premeditation becomes impossible to deny, and I have to sit down when he tells me because my legs feel weak. She planned this at least a day in advance, maybe longer. I need more clothes from the apartment, so I go back one evening during what should be Olivia's work hours. But I run into her in the hallway, and she asks if I'm feeling better with this concerned expression that makes my skin crawl. I say yes and keep my voice neutral, not giving her anything. When I mention the police investigation, she calls me paranoid and says equipment fails sometimes. Why am I making this into something it's not? I don't engage because there's no point arguing with someone who tried to cook me alive. I lock myself in my room and text Celestine that I'm here and uncomfortable, then grab what I need as fast as possible. That night, back at Celestine's place, I wedge my bedroom door shut with a chair under the handle. I pack a go bag with my important documents, medications, phone charger, and some cash in case I need to leave quickly. I share my live location with Celestine through my phone settings and set up a voice recording app in case I need audio evidence of anything. The level of caution exhausts me but feels necessary when I'm dealing with someone who planned attempted murder. I barely sleep that night, listening for sounds in the apartment even though I know Olivia doesn't know where Celestine lives. 2 days later, I'm making tea in Celestine's kitchen and steam rises from the kettle spout. My chest tightens and suddenly I can't get air into my lungs. The room spins and I'm back in that sauna with heat closing in and no way out. My hands shake and I slide down to sit on the floor, trying to breathe but only managing short gasps. Celestine finds me there and drives me to urgent care where they confirm it's a panic attack. The doctor gives me information about trauma responses and how my brain is protecting me from perceived danger even when I'm safe. It's embarrassing to have this kind of reaction to steam from a kettle, but the doctor says it's completely normal after what I survived. I file a formal complaint with the gym's corporate office the next day, documenting the incident and Olivia's employment there in detail. They respond within 2 days saying they're placing her on administrative leave pending the police investigation. Lewis, the manager, calls to apologize again and assure me they're taking this seriously, that they've already started reviewing their safety procedures. I feel a small measure of control returning, like my actions are having real consequences instead of just disappearing into bureaucracy. Detective Swain interviews Olivia at the station and calls to update me afterward. She claims she left after letting me into the sauna and didn't return that evening. When he presents the keycard logs showing her second access 20 minutes later, she says she forgot something in her locker and had to go back. Her alibi is thin and contradictory, but not technically impossible to explain away. He tells me these cases require building evidence carefully, because intent is the hardest thing to prove in court. Someone can do something dangerous and claim it was an accident or a mistake, and juries need proof beyond reasonable doubt. I understand what he's saying, but it's hard to accept that her planning and lying might not be enough. A few days later, Detective Swain calls to say someone from my apartment building contacted him with information. A woman who lives 2 floors down saw Olivia's car in the parking lot late at night on dates that match when my room was used without permission, and when the sandwich appeared in my drawer. The witness kept a mental note because she thought it was odd that Olivia would be coming and going at such strange hours when she supposedly had early work shifts. The timing isn't perfect proof, but it adds another piece to the pattern, and Detective Swain says he's adding it to his file. I'm starting to understand that justice doesn't happen through one big moment, but through lots of small facts that build on each other. The next morning, Detective Swain reviews the gym's hallway security footage and finds something important. The cameras show Olivia walking toward the locker room area twice that evening, and the second timestamp matches her keycard access exactly. She's only visible for a few seconds, but her walk is quick and focused, not the casual pace of someone who forgot their keys or phone. Detective Swain tells me this helps prove she had opportunity, even if it doesn't show exactly what she did. I ask if we can get footage from inside the locker room, but he says those cameras were off for maintenance that week, which feels too convenient to be an accident. 2 days later, I go back to the apartment during Olivia's work shift to grab more clothes. While I'm there, I remember the thermostat Detective Swain mentioned, and I find it mounted near the sauna equipment storage area. The plastic cover has small pry marks around the edges, like someone used a screwdriver to pop it open. I take photos from multiple angles with my phone, making sure the marks are clear and the timestamp shows. I send everything to Detective Swain immediately, and he responds within an hour saying he'll contact the gym to preserve that equipment as evidence. Being able to do something active instead of just waiting for updates makes me feel less stuck. That night at Celestine's place, I can't sleep, so I start researching sauna safety standards online. I learn that commercial saunas are required to have automatic shutoffs that kick in at dangerous temperatures, usually around 194 degrees. The thermostat should have multiple fail-safes to prevent exactly what happened to me. Reading the technical specifications makes the situation clearer because now I understand what had to be disabled or overridden to trap me that long. The malice becomes more obvious when I see how many safety features someone had to bypass. Knowledge replaces some of the scared feeling I've been carrying around since the hospital. The next afternoon, Celestine suggests we organize all the evidence into one clear timeline. We spread everything out on her dining table and start arranging it by date. Text messages, keycard logs, hospital records, police reports, photos of the pry marks, witness statements, everything gets put in order. Celestine's computer science background helps because she knows how to make spreadsheets and backup systems. She sets up cloud storage for all the files and creates a master document with links to every piece of evidence. Seeing it laid out like this makes the case feel stronger, and my memory feel more reliable because I'm not just relying on my brain to hold all the details. I contact a legal aid office and schedule an appointment to discuss a restraining order. The lawyer I meet with is patient and walks me through the paperwork step by step. I have to describe the sauna incident in detail, and several times I need to stop and take deep breaths. Writing down that I thought I was going to die makes it feel real again in a way that's hard to handle. The lawyer explains that a temporary restraining order will legally require Olivia to stay away from me while the criminal investigation continues. She says the hearing will happen within 2 weeks and I should bring all my evidence. 2 days after filing the restraining order paperwork, my phone buzzes with a notification from the apartment's electrical monitoring app. The power in my bedroom has tripped even though I haven't been staying there. I drive over to check and find the breaker for my room switched to the off position. I photograph the breaker panel with the switch clearly visible and add a timestamp note in my phone. It's a small thing compared to the sauna, but it shows Olivia is still messing with my stuff, still trying to make my life difficult. I add the photos to my restraining order evidence file and send copies to Detective Swain. A week passes and Detective Swain calls with an update. He got approval to subpoena the gym's complete camera backup system and all maintenance logs going back 6 months. He warns me that getting everything will take time because the gym's corporate office has to approve the release, and their legal department moves slowly. He tells me that being thorough matters more than being fast when building a case that could go to trial. I practice patience even though every day feels long, and I keep checking my phone for updates. The gym's corporate office officially suspends Olivia pending the investigation outcome. That same day, she starts posting on social media about liars and people who make false accusations to get attention. She doesn't name me directly, but anyone who knows the situation would understand who she means. I screenshot every post she makes and send them to Detective Swain and my lawyer. Her online behavior shows she's feeling pressure, which is satisfying, but also concerning because I don't know how desperate or angry she might get. The restraining order hearing date arrives and I dress carefully, wanting to look put together and credible. Olivia shows up with her own lawyer who argues there's no proven threat, and that equipment malfunctions happen. My legal aid lawyer presents the evidence timeline with all the documentation we organized. She shows the pattern of harassment, the keycard logs, the witness statement, the photos of pry marks, everything arranged to tell a clear story. The judge reviews the materials and asks Olivia's lawyer several questions about the second keycard access and the removed deadbolt. After 20 minutes of back and forth, the judge grants a temporary restraining order requiring Olivia to stay at least 100 yards away from me and have no contact of any kind. Olivia stares at me from across the courtroom with pure anger in her eyes, but she doesn't say anything. I feel relief that there's now a legal barrier between us, but I also feel aware that this might make her even more mad, and I don't know what she'll do with that anger. The next afternoon, Ruth calls while I'm organizing files at Celestine's place. She says the restraining order changes things, and with an active criminal investigation, both of us should plan to move when the lease ends in 2 months. Her voice is apologetic but firm, and I understand her position even though it means more disruption. I tell her that's fair, and we agree I'll be out by the end date without penalties. After hanging up, I open apartment search websites and start filtering for studios I can afford alone. The prices make me wince, but having my own space with locks only I control feels worth stretching my budget. I bookmark 3 possibilities and schedule viewings for the weekend, taking small concrete steps toward rebuilding. My follow-up doctor appointment happens 3 days later, and she reviews my latest blood work carefully. The kidney function numbers are back in normal range, which is huge relief, but she asks about ongoing symptoms. I admit the fatigue hasn't improved much, and I still can't handle heat without my heart racing and dizziness starting. She nods and says heat sensitivity after severe exposure can last months, and my body went through major trauma. She writes a detailed note for my employer explaining I need temporary accommodations, including flexible hours and remote work options when possible. Having official medical documentation that validates this isn't something I can just push through, makes me feel less like I'm being weak or difficult. She schedules another follow-up in 6 weeks and reminds me to stay hydrated and avoid any heat exposure, including hot showers and sunny days without protection. Detective Swain calls that evening with an update that makes my pulse quicken. The gym's tool checkout logs show Olivia signed out a maintenance toolkit on the afternoon before the incident, right around the time the deadbolt removal was logged in the system. His voice carries quiet satisfaction when he explains this connects her directly to both the means and the timing. I feel my anger finding a clearer direction as the evidence stops being circumstantial and starts being concrete. She didn't just have access to the sauna, she deliberately checked out the exact tools needed to remove the deadbolt, and she did it the day before inviting me. The planning becomes impossible to deny, and I thank him for the update, my hands shaking slightly as I write down the details. 2 days later, he calls again, and this time his tone is even more satisfied. The IT department restored a deleted maintenance note from the gym system that ties the deadbolt removal work order directly to Olivia's employee ID number. Someone tried to erase the digital trail, but the backup system kept everything, and the timestamp matches exactly when she had the toolkit signed out. Detective Swain says this is significant because it shows consciousness of guilt, that she knew what she did was wrong and tried to cover it up. I allow myself to feel grim satisfaction that her planning wasn't as thorough as she thought. She left digital footprints everywhere, and the gym's backup systems caught all of it. He tells me he's bringing her in for a second interview now that he has this accumulated evidence, and I should expect to hear from him afterward. The call comes late that same night, and Detective Swain sounds tired but grimly satisfied. He brought Olivia in and confronted her with everything: the keycard logs, the tool checkout, the deleted work order, the thermostat tampering evidence. She broke down after about an hour and admitted to removing the deadbolt and tampering with the thermostat, but tried to frame it as a test that went wrong. She claimed she wanted to see how long I'd stay calm in a stressful situation, and didn't intend real harm, that she was going to come back and let me out. Her attempt to minimize attempted murder as some kind of prank gone bad makes me feel physically ill. Detective Swain says her story doesn't hold up because she accessed the sauna area and then left the building entirely according to her car's exit from the parking garage. There's no evidence she planned to return, and plenty of evidence she set a trap and walked away. I thank him and sit in Celestine's spare room feeling validated and disgusted at the same time. Celestine finds me there an hour later, and I tell her about Olivia's confession. She immediately says I need to move out of the shared apartment now, not wait until the lease ends in 2 months. I start to argue that I can avoid Olivia for 8 more weeks, but she cuts me off and points out the restraining order only works if Olivia follows it, and we already know she's willing to hurt me. Her directness breaks through my resistance, and I finally agree. She helps me call Ruth and coordinate retrieving my remaining belongings with a police standby present. Ruth approves it immediately given the circumstances, and we schedule it for 2 days out when an officer can be there. The prospect of going back to that apartment makes my stomach tight, but knowing I'll have legal protection, and Celestine with me, makes it bearable. The police standby happens on a gray Saturday morning, and the officer meets us outside the building. He's professional and calm, and explains he'll ensure no contact between us while I gather my things. We go up together, and he knocks on the apartment door to inform Olivia that I'm retrieving my belongings with police present. I hear her voice respond from inside but can't make out words. The officer nods to me, and I unlock the door with my key, moving quickly to my room while he positions himself in the hallway. I pack efficiently, taking only what's definitely mine, and leaving anything shared or questionable behind. Celestine helps carry boxes, and within 90 minutes we have everything loaded in her car. I leave my keys on the kitchen counter and walk out without looking back at the closed door to Olivia's room. The officer follows us down and waits until we drive away. Walking out with my last box feels like closing a chapter, and I'm grateful for the legal protection that made this possible without confrontation. The next week, Detective Swain calls to say the district attorney is reviewing the complete evidence file and considering what charges to file. He explains they're weighing reckless endangerment versus attempted assault, and the challenge is proving intent for the more serious charges. Reckless endangerment is easier to prove because it only requires showing she created serious risk of injury, but attempted assault requires proving she specifically intended to hurt me. I listen carefully as he walks me through the legal reality that often involves compromise between what actually happened and what can be proven beyond reasonable doubt in court. The distinction frustrates me because I know she meant to hurt me, but I understand the prosecutor needs evidence that convinces 12 strangers. He says the DA should make a decision within a few weeks and he'll keep me updated. 3 days later, my phone buzzes with a text from Olivia, and my stomach drops when I open it. The message references timing someone's panic and watching temperature climb and mentions hoping the test would work. I read it twice before realizing this wasn't meant for me. She sent it to the wrong person. My hands shake as I immediately screenshot the text with the timestamp visible and forward it to Detective Swain and my legal aid lawyer with a brief explanation. Her own words admitting to monitoring my distress might be the clearest evidence of intent we have. She realizes her mistake within minutes and sends a flurry of messages saying her phone was hacked and that text wasn't from her. But the damage is done, and her panicked backtracking only makes it more obvious. I don't respond to any of her messages and let my lawyer and Detective Swain handle it. The misdirected text changes everything, and Detective Swain calls the next morning to say the DA is moving forward. Based on the accumulated evidence, including Olivia's own words about timing my panic and watching the temperature, they're filing charges for reckless endangerment and criminal tampering with safety equipment. The tampering charge is a felony because she deliberately disabled safety mechanisms in a way that created serious risk. He tells me she'll be arrested within the next day or two and released on bail with conditions including maintaining the restraining order and surrendering her gym employment immediately. I feel relief mixed with awareness that this is just the beginning of a legal process that could take months. The arrest brings official consequences, but the court case still has to happen, and I know from Detective Swain's explanations that trials can drag on. Still, knowing she'll face a judge and formal charges makes me feel like the system is finally catching up to what she did. The HR meeting happens 3 days later in a small conference room with my manager and the HR director. I bring the hospital discharge papers, the doctor's note about heat sensitivity and fatigue, and a copy of the restraining order. They review everything carefully and ask questions about what accommodations would help me stay productive. I explain I need flexible start times because sleep is unpredictable right now, and the option to work from home when I'm having bad days with the anxiety. They approve both requests for the next month with a plan to reassess after that. My manager adds that my work has been solid and they want to support me through this, which makes me feel less like my entire existence revolves around what Olivia did. Having official workplace backing helps me separate this crisis from every other part of my life. Ruth calls the next afternoon saying she reviewed the restraining order paperwork and criminal charges. She releases me from the lease-breaking penalties entirely, explaining that the documented safety threat justifies early termination. I drive over to sign the papers and she wishes me well, mentioning she'll be more careful with tenant screening going forward. The financial relief hits immediately because I was dreading that penalty on top of medical bills and new apartment costs. Knowing I can put that money toward a security deposit instead of paying to escape danger feels like one practical problem solved. Ruth seems genuinely concerned and apologizes for not catching the harassment pattern earlier, and I appreciate the acknowledgement even though it doesn't change what happened. Louis from the gym emails asking if I'd be willing to consult on new safety protocols they're developing. He explains they want panic buttons installed in all enclosed spaces, mandatory buddy systems for after-hours access, and override limits on heating equipment that prevent tampering. Reading his message brings up complicated feelings, because I don't want to go back there, but I also don't want someone else trapped the way I was. I respond agreeing to one meeting because preventing future incidents matters more than my discomfort. We schedule it for the following week at a coffee shop nowhere near the gym, and I appreciate that he's not asking me to return to the actual building. My legal aid lawyer calls with news that Olivia's attorney wants to discuss a plea deal. They're offering guilty to misdemeanor reckless endangerment with 2 years probation and mandated counseling, in exchange for dropping the felony tampering charge. My lawyer explains this means guaranteed consequences versus the uncertainty of trial, where a jury might not convict on the more serious charge. I ask what happens if we go to trial and lose, and she's honest that Olivia could walk away with nothing. The reality of legal strategy versus justice frustrates me because I know she deliberately tried to hurt me, but proving that beyond reasonable doubt to 12 strangers is different from knowing it myself. I tell my lawyer I need time to think about it, and she says to take a few days but not too long because the offer won't stay open forever. I meet Celestine for dinner and lay out the plea deal options. She listens to the whole explanation and then asks what I actually want from this process. I realize I want Olivia to face real consequences and get help so she doesn't hurt someone else, but I don't need her in prison to feel safe. Celestine points out that guaranteed probation with mandatory counseling achieves both those goals, while trial risks getting nothing. My lawyer calls back the next day and I tell her I'll accept the plea deal. She says the sentencing hearing will happen in 2 weeks, and I can read a victim impact statement if I want to. I spend the next several days writing and rewriting what I want to say, trying to capture the fear and ongoing trauma without sounding overly dramatic or vengeful. The sentencing hearing takes place in a small courtroom with just the judge, lawyers, Olivia, and a few observers. I sit in the front row and my hands shake when they call me forward to read my statement. I talk about the terror of being trapped with the temperature climbing, the physical injuries that required hospitalization, and the betrayal of someone I lived with deliberately putting me in danger. My voice wavers, but I get through it without crying, describing the ongoing anxiety around heat and enclosed spaces and how the harassment pattern showed escalating hostility. I keep it under 2 minutes like my lawyer advised and return to my seat without looking at Olivia. The judge thanks me and asks Olivia if she has anything to say, and she offers a brief apology that sounds rehearsed. The judge accepts the plea agreement and sentences Olivia to 2 years probation, 200 hours community service, mandatory anger management and mental health counseling, and continuation of the restraining order for the full probation period. He emphasizes that any violation will result in immediate jail time and revocation of the plea deal. It's not prison, but it's real consequences with required intervention, and I leave the courthouse feeling bittersweet acceptance that this is as close to justice as the system provides. Celestine meets me outside and we sit on a bench for a while without talking, just processing that this chapter is officially closed even if the recovery continues. Some friends drift away over the following weeks, either uncomfortable with the intensity or unsure who to believe despite the conviction. A few others reach out to apologize for not taking the earlier harassment seriously, saying they thought I was overreacting to roommate friction. I'm learning to be more selective about my circle and appreciate the people who showed up when it mattered. Celestine never wavered. Alaya followed through with testimony, even though she barely knew me, and a handful of other friends checked in consistently. Those are the relationships I'm investing in now, and I'm okay letting the uncertain ones fade. I move into my new studio apartment the first weekend of the next month. It's small, but it's mine alone, and I spend the first week installing good locks on the door and windows, setting up a doorbell camera, and adding window alarms. The security measures feel necessary rather than paranoid, and I establish routines that make the space feel predictable and safe. Cooking dinner in my own kitchen without worrying about sabotage or hostile energy becomes a quiet victory. I arrange my furniture to maximize the natural light and create clear sightlines to both entrances. Every choice is mine, and that autonomy matters after months of navigating someone else's hostility. I start weekly therapy sessions with Suzanne, who specializes in trauma recovery. She gives me practical tools for managing triggers and anxiety, including grounding techniques for when steam or heat causes flashbacks. We practice identifying the difference between real danger and remembered fear, and she validates that healing isn't linear. Some days I feel strong and capable. Other days the sound of a heater clicking on makes my heart race. Suzanne helps me track progress over weeks rather than days, and having professional support makes the hard moments feel more manageable. She also works with me on boundary setting and recognizing warning signs in relationships, skills I clearly needed before all this happened. Alaya texts asking how I'm doing, and we agree to meet for coffee near the gym. I thank her properly for saving my life, and she says she was just doing what anyone should do, but we both know that's not true. Most people would have walked past the sauna or assumed the door was supposed to be closed. Her willingness to investigate and then follow through with calling for help and giving testimony made everything else possible. I tell her she's genuinely a hero in my story, and she looks uncomfortable with the label, but accepts my gratitude. We talk for an hour about her work and my new apartment. Normal conversation that feels healing in its ordinariness. She mentions she's been more vigilant about checking equipment and spaces at work since that night, and I'm glad something positive came from her experience too. 3 months after the incident, a thick envelope arrives from the probation department with official stamps across the front. I open it at Celestine's kitchen table and pull out the compliance report showing Olivia has attended every mandated counseling session, completed 40 hours of community service so far, and maintained 0 contact violations. The probation officer's note confirms she's following all conditions exactly, and recommends extending the restraining order for the full 2-year period. I read through the document twice, checking the dates and signatures, and something tight in my chest loosens just slightly. Knowing there's official monitoring and real consequences for any contact makes the hypervigilance I've been carrying ease back a notch. I file the report in my growing folder of legal documents and text Celestine a photo with the caption, "Still complying." She responds with a thumbs up and reminds me this is what accountability looks like, even if it's not perfect. Work stabilizes over the following weeks as I return to normal hours, and my manager assigns me a small website redesign project. It's modest, but challenging enough to rebuild my confidence without overwhelming me, and I appreciate that she judged the scope correctly. She checks in every few days with quick messages asking how I'm managing the workload, but she doesn't hover or treat me like I might break at any moment. The balance feels right, and I make steady progress on the project, meeting deadlines and contributing in team meetings without the fog of exhaustion that hung over me for months. My finances recover slowly despite the medical bills still arriving in waves. I set up a payment plan with the hospital billing department that spreads the debt over 18 months, and while it's tight, I can manage it alongside rent and basic expenses. The financial stress stops feeling quite so crushing when I see the balance decreasing each month. I practice setting firm boundaries in all my relationships now, both online and in person. When a coworker asks too many questions about the incident, I say I'm not discussing it and redirect the conversation without apologizing. When someone from the apartment building friend group tries to reconnect after months of silence, I politely decline and don't explain why. I keep an emergency plan organized without obsessing over it. Important documents stay in one folder by the door, Celestine has my spare apartment key, and Detective Swain's contact sits saved in my phone under DS. The awareness feels like having agency rather than living in paranoia, and I'm learning to recognize the difference between reasonable caution and letting fear control every choice I make. Suzanne helps me check this balance in therapy, asking whether my safety measures serve a practical purpose or feed anxiety, and I'm getting better at telling the two apart. Walking past a gym one evening on my way to meet Celestine, warm air from the entrance brushes my face and my pulse quickens immediately. I stop on the sidewalk and notice the reaction without judging it, breathing slowly like Suzanne taught me during our grounding exercises. My heart rate climbs but then steadies after a few seconds, and I choose to keep walking toward the coffee shop 2 blocks ahead, rather than crossing the street to avoid the building. The fear is still there sitting in my chest, but it doesn't own me anymore, and I'm proud of that small, reclaimed piece of normal life. Inside the coffee shop, Celestine waves from a corner table and I slide into the seat across from her, ordering my usual drink and settling into easy conversation about her work project. The gym fades into background noise as we talk. Just another building on a street full of buildings, and that feels like progress worth noting.